Good morning, Crosswalk. Why don't we stand up? Let's sing together. Let's have some fun today. Come on, sing this out. We worship the God who was. We worship the God who is. We worship the God who evermore will be. He opened the prison doors. He parted the raging sea. My God, He holds the victory. Come on. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. Oh, oh, oh. We shout out your praise. We sing to the God who heals. We sing to the God who saves. We sing to the God who always makes a way. 'Cause He hung up on that cross, then He rose up from that grave. My God, still rolling stones away. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. This is why we sing. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. Come on. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today.
And we won't be quiet.
Oh, we shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet. We're gonna shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. And we won't be quiet. We're gonna shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. And we won't be quiet. We're gonna shout out your praise. We shout out your praise. There is joy in this house today. We shout out your praise. We shout out your praise.
Let's sing this together with one voice. These are the days that we prayed for. A stirring of faith has begun. And I've seen so much, still I'm certain that the best is not yet come. Jesus, you're not done with me. You're doing a new thing. You're doing
all the sins that held us back are laid to waste. Jesus, you're not done with me. You're doing a new thing. You're doing a new thing. For all I've seen, I still believe. You're doing a new thing. You're doing a new thing. You're doing a new thing in us. Oh, yeah. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. I know. I know. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. I know. I know. Jesus, you're not done with me. You're doing a new thing every day. You're doing a new thing. For all I've seen, I still believe. You're doing a new thing. You're doing a new thing. Whoa. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. Your love is never gonna give up. You never give up. You never give up on me. I know. I know. Jesus, you're not done with me. You're doing a new thing. You're doing a new thing. For all I've seen, I still believe that you're doing a new thing. Yes, you're doing a new thing.
Let's sing this together. You will never leave. Your love sustaining me. Before I even knew what love was, you brought me here to rest and given me space to breathe. So I'll stay still until it sinks in. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. I'll breathe deep and know that He Your love sustaining me before I even knew what love was. You brought me here to rest and given me space to breathe. So I'll stay still until it sinks in. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father, so beautiful. I'll breathe deep and know that He's good. He's a love like no other. Oh, I am yours and I am loved, Jesus. I am yours. I'm accepted for who I am. I'm your child. Church, sing this with one voice. Now I can see. Now I can see your love is better than all the others that I've seen. I'm breathing deep all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. Now I can see your love is better than all the others that I've seen. I'm breathing deep all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. Now I can see your love is better than all the others that I've seen. I'm breathing deep all of your goodness, your loving kindness to me. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. I will breathe deep and know that He is good. He is a love like no other. I'll lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father, so good to me. And I'll breathe deep and know that He is good. He is a love like no other. I will lean back in the loving arms of a beautiful Father. I'll breathe deep and know that He is good. He is a love like no other. God, you are so good. Thank you for your unchanging, unfailing love. We are in constant awe of your faithfulness to us. Thank you for revealing yourself to us in the everyday, in the people we live with, in the interactions that we have with others. Lord, be with this community, be with this world. Thank you for your grace. In your precious name I pray. Amen. You may be seated.
Good morning, Crosswalk family. How y'all doing today? It is good to see you. It is great to be together here. Thanks for coming to worship with us today. If you are watching and you're with us online, we're so grateful for you. Hey, last weekend was phenomenal. We were so blessed to be able to worship here to celebrate Easter. And I want to say a special word to our online audience because we had a really special way of connecting with you. It was amazing to see the way people were connecting from across the world. We had people watching from Australia and Chile and all over Canada, the US. It was phenomenal. And so we were just basking in the glow of all that goodness all week long. It's been a really special time. But thanks for being here today, and thanks for tuning in today. I got a few special announcements. I want to make sure you guys are aware of all these really important details. First off, our Vacation Bible School registration is going to open on May 1st. So that'll be for the kids. You can sign up your kids on May 1. But if you are willing and able to volunteer, you can sign up today. You can go to crosswalkvillage.com/CWKids to sign up to be a volunteer. And the first 20 volunteers are going to get a free Crosswalk mug. So we know you love coffee. If you want to, have a Crosswalk mug, sign up today because you could get it. So make sure you mark that on your calendar. VBS is going to be phenomenal. If you heard last week, and we've been announcing for a little bit, we are going to be having a Spanish interest meeting next Sabbath. That's April 30. It's going to be after the 12 o'clock service. Yeah, it's going to have there's going to be a lunch provided, but we need you to register if you're planning to come to this. I know last week Pastor Isai gave this beautiful announcement in Spanish. I didn't understand a word of it. I'm afraid you have to just deal with my English today, but we want you to be there because we feel and we believe God is calling us to really lean into this special form of ministry, and we want to see what that could look like here at Crosswalk. So next Saturday, mark that on your calendar. Sign up online at crosswalkvillage.com/Redlands. Click on the calendar and you'll see the link there. Hey, next Saturday, we are beginning a new sermon series. It is called Christophany, and we're looking at Jesus in the Old Testament. It's going to be phenomenal. And with each new series, we want to invite you to partner with one of our small connect groups. We want you to get involved. This is a great way to continue to deepen your faith in God and also connect with community. So we've got a few new groups that are opening up and beginning. One is going to be live right here down the street. So there's a live group for young adults, young professionals. It's going to be meeting on Thursday nights. We've got a new virtual group that's going to be specifically for those that have experienced loss. It'll be a grief support group. That's going to be Thursday nights virtually. We've got another virtual group that started with our Beloved series, meets on Wednesdays. You can tune into that. And all of our groups are continuing to journey. There's plenty of space. So please think about that and join one of our groups so that you can connect in deeper ways. Hey, if you're interested in being part of an adult study class here at Crosswalk on Saturday mornings, our faith and culture class, which has been meeting virtually, is going to be meeting live here on campus at 12 o'clock. So we're going to be having them meet in the north building in our conference room. So you'll be entering in the far entrance of our north building, 12 o'clock, faith and culture. This is a discussion group. They've been studying a book on Romans. Phenomenal. There's also a hybrid version here. You can connect virtually still, but they'll be now meeting in person. So just a reminder for you for that. Hey, for our Future of ministry, there's an exciting event coming up next month, May 22nd. Future of is having a creative summit right here at Crosswalk Redlands. It's going to be a phenomenal time for our youth to cast vision, to see about what God has planned and purposed in their lives. There's going to be a panel discussion. You can register for that online. So make sure if you're part of collegiate ministry, Future of, you get signed up for that today. Friends, last weekend was so great. We've got a little recap video we're going to see before Pastor Tim comes up. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hey, good morning, Crosswalk. Morning. Morning. Good to have you guys back. Thanks for that. Last week was phenomenal. We keep trying to come up with adjectives because Mike keeps using all the good ones. But it was amazing. It wasn't just amazing here at Crosswalk Redlands. It was amazing at Crosswalk LA. They had record numbers, which was so cool for them. That was their 4th week of going weekly, and they're just killing it down there. Such an amazing job. Almost 300 people in their service up in Portland, which was their biggest number that they've ever had too, which is just great. They're doing such a great job there. Chattanooga went all in. Pastor Sam Lenore was preaching there, and they had a choir, and they blew it out for both of their services. Clinton just had a wonderful time. They got to spend time together on Friday night at a coffee shop. They took over this coffee shop and hung out and talked about the crucifixion, and then celebrated the resurrection the next day as well. Man, it's been really good. Even our Woodlands campus did some special stuff. Our Woodlands Lovewell group did some special stuff. It was great. And on those high weekends, right, you get so pumped up, and then you can even see, if you look around, there's a bunch of empty seats. Like at the weekend afterwards, people are like, I'm really tired, and then they don't come to church, or they all go to Coachella. It's possible. Luckily, that's not every weekend, but yeah, what do you do, right? It's like it's over. And then, you go back to normal? And the answer to that is, yeah, sort of. You kind of do. But you kind of wish there was an epilogue to that, right? You wish there was some sort of recap or wrap up. And I don't know about you, but I'm somebody who loves reading epilogues when they show up in a book. Do you read prologues? Are you prologue readers? People who read the foreword in the book? Because not everybody does. You know that, right? Some people just jump past the foreword and go right into the book. But I had a professor in college who was like, you have to read the foreword. And I was like, well, why? Nobody has to read the foreword. And he's like, you do. Because at the end, when they finally finish the book, they go back and write the foreword. And sometimes they let you in on the big themes you need to be looking for. And he said, especially when you're in college, you might not even have to read the book. I was like, I'm in. That's perfect. Epilogues are easier to read, though. In fact, you know what epilogues are like? For us now in the modern world, who we don't really read books anymore. But the Marvel, when you watch a Marvel movie and you're watching the credits, you always watch to see those hidden scenes, right? Because they kind of wrap things up. This is what happened to this character. This is what happened to that character. And so today we're going to be talking about an epilogos. Right? An epilogue, this is obviously the Greek word that the word epilogue comes from, but it is the concluding word, if it were, as it were. So epilogue, it's the concluding word. It's kind of the postscript at the end that has a tendency to tie everything together. So we're actually going to stay in the book of John for one more week. I know our beloved series is over, but we're going to stay for one more week because I really wanted to preach on this. And I was like, can I preach on this on Easter? And the whole staff was like, no, you have to preach about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And I was like, well, that makes sense. On Easter, I guess. But there's this really cool thing that happens afterwards that we need to preach on. And they're like, you can preach on the campus day, because that's what technically we're in between our series. We have a campus day. So right now, I think most of our campuses have a live speaker, either their campus pastor or somebody who's speaking on their, from their community. But I get to preach in our campus day. So sorry, you hear me again. But I'm going to talk about the epilogue. I'm going to talk about chapter 21. And if you haven't read the book of John all the way through to chapter 21, you realize this was written a little bit later, and John needed to do something. He needed to wrap some things up. Now, what's fascinating about John chapter 21 is that he wraps some things up, and then some other things fall apart, and it ends like this. It ends with Jesus saying to Simon Peter, if I want to keep John alive until I come, I can do that. And then it's over. You're like, what? So we're going to be dealing with the first 18 verses in the book of John, not the last few, which will make it a little bit confusing. I hope that's okay. But this is the epilogue, and it starts like this. It starts later. Jesus appeared again to the disciples beside the Sea of Galilee. This is how it happened. Later, after these things. It's no real time frame. It's not like immediately after that we see in like chapter 6 of the book of John. But it's like later, This happened too, and so it's this postscript, it's this epilogue, and it says several of the disciples were there, and it lists the disciples that were there: Simon Peter, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, who are James and John, as we know, and 2 other disciples. Now, I don't know what those 2 other disciples did, not to get named, but they must have made John mad at some point. And he's like, and those other dudes, who I'm not even going to tell you who they are. Apparently, they didn't make the grade. But 7 in total: Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, James, and John, and then 2 other named. Simon Peter says this. He's like, listen, I'm going fishing. It's really fascinating the way I read that makes a difference to the way you understand it, right? If I say, I'm going fishing, right? You have this sense of like he's done, he's tired, he's leaving, he's going fishing. If I say, I'm going fishing, right? Simon Peter says, I'm going fishing. That's a different kind of feel. So what's interesting is that in this text over the last 2,000 years, commentators have said a lot of things. One of the things they've said is Simon Peter saying, I'm going fishing, was Simon Peter turning his back on the work that Jesus had given him to do, was him walking back to his old life, because you remember, he's a fisherman. So there are some commentators say that Simon Peter was saying it like this: I'm going fishing. And he leaves and he walks away. How many of you like to fish here? Anybody like to fish? Anybody catch fish? Because I've been fishing maybe 15, 20 times in my life. I've never caught a fish, ever. Ever. I've never caught, like there's never been a fish on my hook. And so we go, and we'll go for like 3 hours. And when I say we go, I mean the last time I went was probably 15 years ago, and I don't know who it was with. But I never get a fish. And in fact, there's 2 interesting things about me. You should know. 1, I've never caught a fish. 2, every horse I've ever been on has bucked me off. They're not related, those 2 facts. I just thought you should know, which is weird. I get it. That's weird. In fact, I felt like God was mocking me one time. We were at the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii, and they have a cool little pond there, and my son was pretty young, and they have these little fishing poles with just strings. They don't have any hooks on them or anything. They're just strings. And my son gets one, the lady gives it to him. My son gets one, and he puts it in the water, and I'm like, Gillespies don't catch fish. A fish bites it, and he pulls up a fish. There's no hook on the string. And the lady's like, did you just pull that up? And Jake's like, yeah. And she's like, there's no hook on that string. And I knew God has a sense of humor, because he's like, bro, this kid's 4, and there's no hook on the string, and he's caught more fish than you have in his life. So, sorry, that was a little bit of a digression there. You didn't need to know all that. But Peter says, I'm going fishing. Now, this is what I think after the study that I've done. I think Peter was a fisherman, and he was hungry, and so he went to go catch some fish. Whether it was for commerce, whether it was for food, I don't know. I don't think this was Peter making a huge metaphorical statement of turning his back on Jesus, because what we see is that the other disciples saying, well, we'll come too. So they went out to the boat, but they caught nothing that night. At dawn, Jesus was standing on the beach, but the disciples couldn't see who he was. Now, we need to recognize something. All throughout this story, all throughout the book of John, we have seen the juxtaposition of light and dark, right? Night and day. And this continues that theme, right? The notion of night and negativity exists in these texts. It's dark, even though morning is coming. It's dark and we can't see yet. This is a continuation of night equaling, well, essentially not good. They couldn't even see Jesus, but the dawn was breaking. So this is a symbol of a new dawning. Something new is coming, where things are going to be made clear and the darkness is going to be rolled away. This is a new era. And if you've ever lived through a new era in your life, in your job, in the world, and I think we've all kind of lived through, 2 years of what felt like darkness, and maybe we're coming out of it again, right? It feels like we need to do some things differently when we're moving into a new era. And, as we see this in the text, we realize that there's this new era dawning. Jesus is there in the new era, which is beautiful. They haven't recognized him yet, but they're also recognizing some things need to change. I think when we live into a new era, we got to think about things being different. So one of the things we have to do is we need to break old habits when we're moving into a new era. Don't do the same thing in a new day. Put something new into your practice, into your habit. And something that allows for a break from the old. So get up earlier or get up later. I don't know what your practice is right now, but change things around a little bit. Change the rhythms of your life so you can live into a new era in a new way. And whatever you do, find things that recapture time in your life. Reorient your life around the gift of time that God has given you. I was on a business Zoom this week, and I was talking to this woman, and I was like, hey, how are things going? And she's like, man, it's busy. It's been so busy. She's like, I've been working like 12 hours a day. It's exhausting. I was like, how long has that been going on? And she looked up. You know how you do to access your memory? She looked up, and she looks in the camera, and she goes, 11 years. And I was like, that's your habit. That's not busy. That's what you live. You need to stop that. It's a new area. You need to stop that now, right? You need to find habits. You need to find new things that give back time, not that take time. And I wonder if the disciples, when they saw Jesus after the resurrection, realized, wait a second, we've got more time. We thought that time was over, but all of a sudden we got more time. Let's not waste that time. And I think lastly, when we live into a new era, we need to recognize that we need to let peace be prevalent in our lives, right? That means we need to sometimes shed some of those old things that are really tearing us down, that are creating chaos in our life. Sometimes we've got to separate ourselves a little bit from relationships that are toxic, that are hard, from jobs that are perhaps toxic, that take over, that are too much. Right? And I think we have to find a way to get peace into our lives. We don't have to fix everything right now, right this moment. We need to find where we need to Sabbath, even if it's for a little moment in our lives. And we need to lean into that as a practice. Anyway, let's get back to the story, right? He called out, fellows, the worst translation, right? First of all, nobody says fellows, right? Because we don't live in 1894. We're not wearing like knickerbockers and walking around trying to sell papers on the corner. I'll recognize that's a weird reference, but that's what I had in my head, so just stick with me. Fellows, that's not what he said. Children is a better translation of that word. Children, but it's really an expression of intimacy as between a parent and a child, or a leader and his followers or her followers, right? So you know what we would say now? We would say family. Family would be in our vernacular, hey family, but we'd be way cooler than that, right? So we go, hey fam. That's what we say, but when I say it, it sounds weird. When Isai says it, you're like, oh. When I say it, you're like, no. You're too old to say things like that, and I understand that. You want to know a really interesting point? Do you know that from this point on, the disciples never catch fish without Jesus being present in all the Gospels? Once the resurrection happens, they never catch a fish unless Jesus is there. And I don't know if, everybody put their heads together and said, hey, we should say this, or if they all, because they didn't put their heads together, they wrote, years apart from each other. I think this was the reality, and I don't know if Jesus was teaching us through metaphor, this is the way it comes through, but they never caught fish without Jesus being present. And I wonder that if we can catch anything without Jesus being present, if we can tell people of the gospel, or even tell people that, hey, Crosswalk's a good community without Jesus being present. Could it be that we're simply not compelling enough without Jesus? Crosswalk is a great place, but without Jesus, are we really worth being a part of? I would say no. I don't want to be a social club. I want to be a body of believers, people who share the gospel and give the gift of grace to other people. And I think that we see that in the fact that they never caught fish without Jesus again, and we don't catch people without Jesus. We just don't. Keeps going. Then he said, this is Jesus speaking on the shore, throw out your net on the right-hand side of the boat and you'll get some. I don't know why fishermen listen to him, right? They are fishermen. This is what they do. And I don't know much about fishing, as I've already explained to you, but I'm pretty sure that if you're fishing with nets, just moving about 4 feet or 6 feet, I don't know how big the boats were, not that big, moving it to the other side are not going to catch you. And these are fishermen. Why are they listening to some dude on the side of the road? Side of the sea. Right? This stranger is telling them their business. Why did they listen? Maybe they were desperate. Maybe they began to realize maybe this is somebody we should listen to. Some commentators said, well, the reason why is because Jesus was on the shore and he could see the shoal of fish on the other side of the boat that they couldn't see because they were looking the other direction. I think that's really pushing it. We've already said this is a guy who resurrected from the dead. And now we're like, well, there's a very clear explanation for this, like a very practical explanation. I think like it's okay for it to be supernatural. We're talking about a guy who resurrected from the dead, right? So like let it be a miracle. It's okay. He didn't just have good eyesight. Right? Oh, there's fish over there. You guys just missed it. I don't think that's, but I think Jesus wanted them to see things differently. You always throw your net over the left side of the boat, throw it over the right side this time, and let's see. Let's see. Right? Tell the truth. Tell it slant so you can see old things new for the first time. This is resurrection life. This is not just crucifixion life. Everything's new. Look at the same things differently. Then the disciple Jesus loved said to Peter, now, John will just not let it go. He has to let you know that Jesus loved him. But what's really interesting is that John has not made Peter look very good throughout this whole thing, right? John's writing after Peter's already dead. But for some reason, he had this little bone to pick with Peter, and Peter does not show up in the best light the whole time. And he shows up great, right? Getting to the tomb first, because he's faster, right? But there is some consistencies. Even though John is always the one Jesus loved, and John gets there first, or recognizes things first, or explains things first, Peter's always the one who acts. Right? So he said to Peter, Peter, it's the Lord. And when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he put on his tunic, for he had stripped for work, probably not naked. There's a whole lot of discussion around this. I spent a good hour reading different commentaries saying, well, he was naked. That's how they did it. And then other people say, no, he wasn't naked. I don't think it matters. But since I did the work, Greek and Roman culture, probably they would have been naked. Jewish culture, oh no, they are not naked. So he probably was wearing a loincloth. I'm glad I solved your curiosity for you. You're welcome. That's an hour of my life I'll never get back. He was probably in a loincloth. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He put on his tunic, and then he jumped into the water. What is it with Peter and boats that he just can't stay in? Right? He jumps into the water. But what's going on is John is, again, doing this contrast, right? He was the one who first recognized Jesus. At the Last Supper, he's the one who had to explain everything, right? At the cross, he was the one who was there. Peter wasn't there. And of course, we see the denial that Jesus had, that Peter had of Jesus, that John made sure was clear. Well, we'll work that out in a second. But I wonder why Peter was the one to always act. Even in John's commentary, Peter's the one who acts. And I wonder if in this instance, I wonder if he acted because he had the most to apologize for. I mean, it's pretty on brand, like I said, for Peter to jump out of a boat. But how do you feel when you've wronged somebody and you just want to make it right? And you see them again and you know it's going to be awkward, but you really need to go talk to them. Have you ever had that situation in your life? Right? You want to get it done. You want to go make things right. It's horrible when you've wronged somebody. It's horrible when you've undermined them. Have you ever said something out of school about somebody that, you like, but you didn't mean to say it, but you got carried away and then they found out? And then the next time you talk to them, it's like, hey. And what you want to do is you kind of want to ignore it, but then they're a little stunted towards you. They're a little like, Well, Peter's in this situation. He hadn't really had a conversation with Jesus since he denied him. So I wonder if he acted because he had the most to apologize for and he was trying to overcompensate a little bit. So he jumps in. The others stayed in the boat and pulled the loaded net to the shore, for they were only about 100 yards from the shore, so they weren't that far away. Some commentators even said, hey, these guys got there first, even though Peter jumped out of the boat. I don't know how they would know that, but there's a long discussion about that. When they got there, they found that breakfast was waiting for them. Fish cooking over a charcoal fire and some bread. Do you know that this phrase, a charcoal fire, only shows up twice in the New Testament? You know when it shows up? Once in the courtyard where Peter denied Jesus, and now. It's a pretty phenomenal thematic tie-in. It's a literary work that we only see twice in chapter 18, verse 8, and here. And there's a juxtaposition between those two fires, right? The first fire is in the darkness, and the second fire is in the morning of new possibilities. Although the earlier fire marked a symbol of kind of an uninviting situation of cold and kind of hostile questioning, the second fire, with its fish and bread, must be seen as kind of an inviting setting for a new round of penetrating questions like the first, but not like the first. Questions that are the complete opposite, in fact, of hostility and are aimed at providing a new commissioning for Peter. So Jesus says, hey, bring some of the fish you just caught. Maybe this is a partnership. So Simon Peter, being the guy who does stuff, Simon went aboard and dragged the net to the shore, where there were, did you know this? 153 large fish. That's a very specific number. And by the way, scholarship over the last 2,000 years has been fascinated by this particular number, 153 fish. There's a bunch of different explanations. By the 3rd and 4th century, Augustine is saying, you know what, there's 153 points in a quadrilateral triangle, and this is why there were 153 fish. That makes no sense to me. And I don't know why Augustine's doing math anyway. That was not really his wheelhouse, right? There's a zoological explanation that some people came up with, that there were 153 different species of fish in the Sea of Galilee. But we know from 1st and 2nd century observation that there were actually at least 157 different. This is what I think. I think they caught 153 big fish. And I think that's way overdoing it for breakfast. Right? That's a lot of fish, but he brings all 153 fish, and he says, now come and have some breakfast. None of the disciples dared to ask him, who are you? Because they knew it was the Lord. But they're still trying to get their head around it. Then Jesus served them the bread and the fish. We see Jesus constantly serving his disciples. He always does this. And in the resurrection, he doesn't stop serving. I think that's a good model for us. We don't stop serving, ever. By the way, this was the 3rd time Jesus had appeared to his disciples since he had been raised from the dead. But now we're about to get into something pretty serious. By the way, you know what's also really interesting? After the resurrection, we never see the disciples and Jesus breaking bread and having wine. They only break bread and have fish. In all of the Gospels, they never have wine again after he shed his blood for them. It's a pretty fascinating way that that's expressed us. After breakfast, this is where it gets important. After breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Right? He was saying, do you love me than everything else that's been going on in your life? He's not saying, like, do you love me more than the fish? Do you love me more than these? He's saying, do you love me? Yes, Lord, Peter says. You know I love you. Then feed my lambs, Jesus says. Now, Peter's answer is relatively off the cuff. You know I love you. Like, no big deal. You know I love you. Well, I don't know, John. I don't know, Peter. Seems like you haven't been acting very loving towards him. Jesus is doing something here. It's important. And by the end of, John is writing in the 1st century, where we begin to see persecution of Christians in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd century, right? Before Constantine really comes in and kind of legalizes Christianity. So there's going to be a lot of persecution. The early church used this particular pericope, this particular story, to deal with and reconcile people who had been persecuted and had denied Jesus in that persecution. This became a really important story for the early church, because what they recognized is that sometimes people deny, but yet they can still be reconciled. And the reason why we know that is this story. And they used it as a model for that reconciliation. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yeah, Lord, you know I do. Okay, then feed my lambs. Jesus repeated the question. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know I love you. Then take care of my sheep. Jesus is doing something, and while it seems redundant, Jesus is teaching here. And Jesus is not giving him the answer to the question. He's leading him to an understanding of what the question really, really is. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, I love you. I already said that. Then take care of my sheep. A 3rd time, he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt now, but hurt's not the right word. Hurt's not a strong enough word. He was grieved deeply. Peter, grieved deeply. Can't believe Jesus is questioning the veracity of his love for him. But I wonder if that's the moment when he began to realize, I think I denied him 3 times. Now I've been asked if I love him 3 times. I was standing by a fire a few days ago, and now I'm standing by a fire. I was asked 3 questions a few days ago, and now I'm being asked 3 questions. Peter was hurt, grieved. Jesus asked the question the 3rd time. He said, Lord, you know everything, and that's the interesting crux. If you know everything and you're asking me still if I love you, maybe I got to question if I love you. Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said, then feed my sheep. You see, Jesus was leading Peter to a defining moment, a moment when he had to face up to himself. And facing up to oneself is a traumatic experience. When you finally recognize the truth of who you are, not the lie in which we often live about ourselves, but the truth of who we are and the truth of what we've done. When we get to that moment, that's when God can use us. That's when God can teach us, because we've stopped lying to ourselves and all of a sudden we've become available for the truth. It took him 3 questions. How many questions does it take God to ask you until you recognize who you are? Now the beauty is, Jesus didn't say, see, you're worthless to me. What Jesus said is, okay, then I've got work for you to do. Do you love me? Feed my sheep. Now we got to ask the question, did Peter learn anything from this interaction? Peter's a hard head, we know this. And in fact, and I'll leave this to you, hopefully sometime this week, read the rest of chapter 21. It's an interesting story because they begin this other argument. And like I said at the beginning, it ends with Jesus saying, Peter, if I want to keep John alive until I come back, I will do that, okay? And then the book ends, which is brutal because you're like, what? And it feels like Peter didn't learn anything. The good news is we have more record of Peter. He's not one of those unnamed disciples that we never hear from again, right? We actually know what Peter did. We have the book of Acts, and we have the books that Peter wrote, the letters that he wrote. And so we know that he finally did learn his lesson. How do we know? Because in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2, he uses this kind of language. Care for the flock that God has entrusted to you. Watch over it willingly, not grudgingly, not for what you will get out of it, but because you are eager to serve God. This language is reminiscent of the previous exchange, right? Jesus reinstated Peter and gave him a job to do. Now, why did he reinstate Peter? Right? Why did Jesus do this? I think there's a few reasons. I think number one, to show the value of forgiveness and reconciliation. Jesus wasn't going to hold it against him that he had a moment of weakness. I'm sure he wasn't happy about it, but he wasn't going to hold it against him. He knew that he needed to come back, and he knew that he needed to be reconciled. And by the way, sometimes we've done something to somebody, or even sometimes they've done something to us, and we never recognize it again, and we just pretend like it didn't happen. And I don't think that's what this model shows us. I think Jesus recognized what happened, but he did it in such a way with such grace that Peter was brought back into the fold almost without even knowing it. Right? And I think we need to do that sometimes. We need to recognize when hurt's happened, when denial of a relationship has happened, and we need to go, hey, it's going to be okay. Reconciliation is important. I think it's also to remind us that we all need reconciliation at times. We will not live this life without ever denying Jesus. Most of us will at some point in some way. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, that's the beginning of a new story it shows us here. And I think there's also a recognition that he did this to show us that this new era is not like the old era we've been living in. We are new beings, resurrected with Christ through baptism. We have been given new chances, not just second chances. And we can do massive things for Jesus in this new era. But we have to go back and do what we're called to do. Because there's another brilliance that happened in these questions. And the brilliance harkens back all the way to the Old Testament and to Exodus and the giving of the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. Because Jesus asked this question, do you love me? This is the first part of the law. The first 5 commandments deal with us and our love for God. You'll not have any gods before you. You'll keep the Sabbath. All these ones, the first 5 of the Decalogue. And by the way, in the book of Matthew, we see Jesus being asked, what must someone do to gain eternal life? And what does he say? He says, you must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind. And the second part is feed my sheep. The second part of the Decalogue, how you get along with one another, how you take care of one another. All that is together, right? And we see it in the New Testament. Jesus redefines it by saying, and love others as you love yourself. Love God, love others. We say it, love well. Jesus asked the question in a particular way. He asked the question so that Peter would understand he was being brought not only back into his discipleship and ultimately his apostleship, but that he understood that this is what it means to believe and love in Jesus Christ. We love God, we love others, and we love well in the way that we live our lives. This epilogue is masterful. It's incredible in the way that it puts everything back in place, how it wraps the story in a way that, would have been kind of would have left us out, and we would have said, well, what's going on? And then we see in the rest of the New Testament the incredible work that Peter actually does because he's been reconciled back into the family of God. So I don't know about you, but I know that if I look back on my life, there are moments where I've denied God. Maybe not verbally, but in the way that I've treated someone, in the way that I felt about someone sometimes, in the way that I've interacted. It's good to know God doesn't leave me there. It's good to know that he reconciles me as well. And I hope you know that all he wants is to reconcile you back to the family. If you feel like you're outside, he wants you back. This is the way that we've been given to live. Peter, do you love me? And feed my sheep. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, Lord, thanks for that. Thanks for that epilogue. We needed that story. We needed that moment to see that, mistakes that we make don't keep us away from you. And that your willingness to reconcile yourself back to us and us back to you. It's powerful, Lord, so thank you. As well as, Lord, the learning that this fulfillment of the law when we love you and love one another remains. May we be those people, Lord. May we be those people every day, every moment. And when we fail, remind us. Forgive us and reconcile us. Lord, thank you. In your name I pray. Amen. Stand and worship with us one more time.
Tried so hard to see it. Took me so long to believe it, that you choose someone like me to carry your victory. Perfection could never earn it. You give what we don't deserve it. Take the broken things and raise them to glory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. And now I can finally see it. You're teaching me how to receive it. So let all the striving cease. Oh, this is my victory. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. You crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. Oh, you conquered it all. When I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority Jesus has given me. When I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority, Jesus has given me. When I lift my voice and shout, every wall comes crashing down. I have the authority, Jesus has given me. When I open up my mouth, miracles start breaking out. I have the authority, Jesus has given me. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated. Every battle you've won. I am who you say I am. To crown me with confidence. I am seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, by the power of your name. I'm seated in the heavenly place, undefeated, with the one who has conquered it all. You are my champion. Giants fall when you stand undefeated.
Amen. Crosswalk family, thank you so much for worshiping with us today. Thank you, praise team, for leading us. Thanks to Pastor Tim for that bonus sermon from our beloved series. It's like a great way to end a beautiful series. It is such a blessing to be part of this family together, to worship together, to be connected in these beautiful ways. I'm so grateful that we were able to be here together today. If you are wanting or needing prayer, our prayer team will be up front right after the service. We invite you to come up and receive that gift. We always want to say thank you for the way you give and you support the work of God here at Crosswalk. It's a beautiful thing to see the way God is moving in such powerful ways, and we are so grateful for your love and your support in those ways. And as Pastor Tim said, as you go out today, may you love God, may you love others, and may you love well. We love you, Crosswalk. We'll see you soon.